ranga madoda lasequnu. Isizalo sasemvezwe zonke zonzobile mthatha. Kuyela wakho Madiba kavela bembhentsela kangqondi nomsila. Nala kufafalu dola zwaya kwizizwe ngezizwe.
I met Utatu Nelson Mandela for the first time in his welcome home rally in the Transkei. So in my poetry before I saw him in 1991, I have always defined Nelson Mandela, the freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, the icon of the continent. I began to sing his praises, imagining what kind of a man he looks like in terms of length, in terms of the build-up, and so on and so forth.
Madiba, Ro Nomsila, the tall man who's world-renowned. For decades, his praises have been sung all around the world. Few did it with pride, passion, and power as Zolani Mkiva.
I became to be known as Nelson Mandela's praise singer. It's a culmination of a number of appearances I have made, wherein I saluted him whilst he was still in jail. It was obvious, therefore, that when Nelson Mandela got released, I was going to be there.
Total jubilation, total excitement. People running alongside the car.
We were very excited. It was quite a fulfilling, atmosphere. There was a lot of exuberance. It was robust because we were jumping around, singing toy toy, doing all sorts of things.
Mkiva also praised Nelson Mandela on the historic day of his inauguration, when Mandela officially became the President of the Republic of South Africa. This led to a remarkable relationship between two custodians of African culture and tradition, which saw Zolani Mkiva travel with Nelson Mandela on many of his presidential visits to foreign lands.
Being asked to be part and parcel of a historic event marking the inauguration of Nelson Mandela was one of the most intimidating invitations for me. I was very anxious. Literally, I didn't sleep a night before. I understood the huge responsibility that was being given to me to render a spiritual and a cultural performance for the first democratically elected president of our country, Dr. Nelson Mandela. I sort of had a sense of saying that, is it by coincidence or by accident or by design that Nelson Mandela, being a royal-blooded son of Africa, becomes the first president of a democratic South Africa?
Madiba was a great warrior in the political arena, a warrior of the struggle for the emancipation of the oppressed. And in 2004, his achievements were recognized when he was bestowed with Isitwalandwe, one of the highest orders in the land.
That sort of interaction that I have had with Nelson Mandela, I think it's something that has made me to mature at a very early age. So I have had an opportunity to listen to Nelson Mandela as he addresses the masses of the people in public. I have learned from him, the whole notion of let bygones be bygones. I've learned a lot from Nelson. I've learned, how a leader should behave. He was sort of a person who remained down to earth.
Africa! Africa! Mayibuye! Amandla!
He was appreciative of the fact that here was a young oral poet, oral traditional poet, singing praises for him, for his country. But he felt the need to motivate me. He was a statesman of a different degree, of the highest degree ever. That's why I say that he was an extraordinary, he was a spiritual leader, he was a living ancestor, a humble humanitarian, a warrior of social justice. And he will always be remembered as such.
Mkiva believes Mandela was the Black Moses, a peace fighter at a time when South Africa was on the brink of civil war. Mandela stepped up and called for peace, harmony, and reconciliation in the country.
Nelson Mandela was a liberator of South Africa, like other liberators of different countries. Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Fidel Castro, José Martí. The list is endless. And we will always remember him as having saved our country from an unprecedented civil war. Were it not for that, you would have been swimming in a bath of blood. But thanks to Nelson Mandela for being a wise man, we will always remember him as one of the greatest leaders to have come from the continent of Africa.
We will always remember and hold you dear in our hearts. Madiba.
All right, we're joined now in studio by praise singer, poet, Imbongi Sizwe. It is the man himself, Zolani Mkiva. A very good morning to you. Thanks again for joining us.
Good morning to you, Ayanda, and good morning to the viewers of SABC.
You know why I'm smiling, right? Because I've been teasing you about this throughout that package. You looked so young while you were busy praising Udadu Madiba and showering him with the cultural and traditional praise. My goodness, you were awfully young, weren't you?
It's more than 20 years when I began. It's 20 years later now, so obviously I'm sure I look like my son.
Yes, yeah, it looks like that's your son. You're sitting here, I'm like, is that you or your son? And many people ask you, but what was that like, that honor that was bestowed upon you?
Wow, even though I'm a poet and a praise poet, sometimes I'm short of words to express the real feeling of how I felt during that time. The welcoming home rally, the inauguration, the adoption of the new constitution of South Africa, all those moments, the formative stages of a new country. And to be there, walking in front of a towering figure, it was really a singular honor, something more than that. I don't know how to, explain it, because the feeling is so great, the feeling is so enormous.
He took a particular liking to you. I mean, he took you almost everywhere that he went. He'd request for you to go there. What was your relationship like with him?
Madiba loved children in generally, so I was one of them. But I was doing something that he likes most because it is something that resonates with him, resonates with his background, resonates with his people. So he gave me a particular special attention and always motivating me to carry on with what I do, and ensuring that I also proceed with my studies. He really appreciated. And one of the things that I noticed is that every moment when I sang those praises before he delivered his keynote address, he would stand up and shake my hand. Athi ndiyabulela mhlekazi. You know, that thing of an old man who is as old as my grandfather to rise for me and shake my hand and congratulate me and say, well done. That really touched me, and we became close. And he would invite me for lunch, for dinner, and in my other positions, I also interacted with him as a coordinator of the Institution of Traditional Leadership in the country. He would ask me to do certain things, and so on and so forth.
Tell us a bit about how you do what you do. I'm going to ask it twofold. How it became that you were a praise singer. You told me that it's something that you inherited. Perhaps tell us a bit more about that. And then the second part of that question is, how do you then do it? Do you memorize this? Do you sit down? Do you write it down? Does it come to you? How does it work?
Well, let me say that it's something that is a divine calling. It's a spiritual calling. Much as I have inherited it from those who came before us. Like my great-grandfather was a praise singer, my grandfather was a praise singer, my father was an orator, his brother, my uncle, was also a praise singer. So I come from that background. So I grew up seeing my elders doing this thing. And I was fortunate enough that I came to see my great-grandfather doing it in action. And I've lived closely with my great-grandfather for 20 years. And he is the real person who really groomed me by listening, by watching, by looking at his gestures, and so on. That is Zolani Mkiva, who passed on in 2001. So he is the man who really instilled this to me, over and above my father, a great, powerful public speaker and orator, Mkiva. These are the people who really helped me to be what I'm known to be today. So that's one dimension. I do not really memorize. I customize each and every rendition according to the event. But obviously there are underlying, you know, idioms and phrases which I construct myself, you understand, as a wordsmith, so that I make my own contribution in the development of the vocabulary of our language, particularly my indigenous language, Xhosa. So those catchphrases, I then infuse them in my poetry as per and when I deliver my rendition. But to capture the essence of what is happening there in order to be relevant, and that which I say to resonate with what I do and the interaction which is required with the audience. So I do it spontaneously.
Zolani, it seems like such a niche, you know, something that's so rare these days. What are you doing to make sure that when you retire one day and you decide, you know, I'm not going to be a praise singer for now, I'm going to rest, who takes this up and runs with that?
Well, I think, we have managed to motivate a lot of young people. We do workshops. We work with the new government of South Africa that understands the importance of mainstreaming, you know, genres like these ones. So we do workshops countrywide. The Department of Arts and Culture is involved. The National Heritage Council is involved. So we ensure that we workshop and ensure that there's a greater understanding of our cultural integrity. There's a greater understanding of our oral protocols or traditional protocols. So from time to time, therefore, we ensure that we motivate the young ones, but also for them to understand when and where to do this thing and how you should present yourself. This is not just something that you just do out of the blue.
It's not hip hop.
It's not hip hop, you know. So it has to be done in a particular manner, you know, with a particular respect, following of heritage, intelligence, and that traditional protocol.
I like how you put it. It must maintain the cultural integrity, which is something that resonated with Nelson Mandela. He always referred to his roots. He always referred to his culture. And oftentimes, whenever he could, he would want to walk through the valleys and the hills of Qunu, because that's where he was at home.
Absolutely. Nelson Mandela is the embodiment of Ubuntu in practice. You understand? He taught me that if you want prosperity for a short term, you grow maize. If you want prosperity for a mid-term, you grow trees. But if you want prosperity for a lifelong term, you grow people. And that's the essence of Ubuntu and the value system of us as Africans.
What do I say to that? My goodness, I'm learning lessons as well today. And I thank you so much for sharing your time and your memory of Udadu Nelson Mandela and the teachings that he taught you. So let's go from one great wordsmith such as yourself and Bongesi's Zolani Mkiva and take a look at another wordsmith in his own right, as someone whose speech was well received yesterday as